Welcome to Show Chic Shop Talk, Learning with the Stars. Today on Shop Talk, Bill Warren and Bill McMillan, the two Bills, will be giving us their 2 cents.
So what you do at home is the most important part of getting ready to go to a show, not just what you do at the show. So let's talk a little bit about what happens at home that can help to get you ready for the show. And I think talking a little bit about the training scale in relation to showing in the levels, you have to look at, we start at the bottom with rhythm. If you think about rhythm, relaxation, and connection, that takes us kind of through training level. We relate this really to the levels. I think it's a good way to look at the training scale if you have or haven't thought about it in that way. But we're looking for, and again, that obviously is are the building blocks for any level there from there on. But at training level, we're looking especially for the rhythm, energy, and tempo, as it says. Relaxation with elasticity and suppleness, so we're starting to develop the bending on the circles and so on, and developing a connection, acceptance of the bit through acceptance of the aids. So, if we can achieve all of that in a nice harmonious way, we have then good basics for a good training level test, yes?
Absolutely.
And then moving on from there, the impulsion, increased energy and thrust is what we're obviously looking for then at first level, right? To develop our lengthenings and trot and canter. And it's not that we're ignoring straightness in these other levels, but then straightness when we get to beyond first level and getting into second level, improved alignment and balance is required, and that we draw on from the lateral work that we've done through our shoulder in, haunches in work, then we're able to achieve a better degree of straightness, right? If we can achieve a better degree of straightness, then finally we can talk about collection or increased engagement and a lighter forehand, which we're looking for at second level and of course from greater degrees from there on. So, and I think thinking about the training scale and the work you do at home, we have to really keep coming back to this training scale all the time and not just get stuck on one part of it, but be ready to say, oh, I'm here, but I may need to go back down here and look at this a little bit. Did I lose the rhythm when working on this degree of straightness or collection? I better be able to assess the connection and the relaxation and rhythm again too, right?
Can I add to that?
Please.
To achieve all of that, and I don't know, how we ride is the only way we can achieve any of that. When we sit on top of the horse in the wrong way, you really hinder each part of that training scale. So to apply that in a good way, we really have to think about how we're riding every step of the way, every day of the week, which ties into what we're going to say later on. But it's important that we sit properly. The way we sit in leg position, hand position was all invented for a reason, because it works. But for all of that to then make sense and get through to the horse, we have to apply it in the right way by how we sit, ride, and apply the aids, which is probably a whole other topic. But it all ties in. You can't say, oh, well, I'm going to do this and then I'm going to learn how to sit properly. It doesn't work that way. We have to be sitting properly along the way to achieve the whole the steps of the training scale.
So now that we've got all that, you've got all that set at home, right? It's all done. You're all good with that. So now you need to be prepared for your show by, the next step is preparing at home is to actually practice riding your test, yes? Sometimes I know people that go to a show that haven't ridden the test. It does happen.
What do I need to do that for? It's only training level or
Right.
whatever. But that actually is like a little A to that. Every day of the week, it isn't only when you want to prepare for a test, but to achieve all of that in the training scale, in addition to how we sit and ride the horse, every footfall of the arena, every line, every circle, every day has to be written in the right way if we want to achieve all of that. To me, a test is only a series of lines anyway. We have movements placed over those lines, but a dressage test is just a series of lines. The individual movements over those lines, that's another thing, but my point is lines and figures are the foundation that we then build the work on. So at home, oh, I'm only warming up, so it's a 20-meter circle that ends up 40, or it's a wavy line or whatever. Oh, well, we'll pay attention to it now when it comes time to working our test for the show. Then it's too complicated. When it's time to go down the center line, all of that should be second nature, so that we can pay attention to riding the horse. Oh, now we got to worry about the points of the ring and whether the circle is really round. Well, the circle should be round every day of the week, every time we ride it. If we ride a 10-meter circle, it only should be 10 meters every time we ride it, not only when. So, anyway, I really feel like it's important that these, well, to achieve top marks, we have to pay attention to details. And the smallest detail is just as important as something else. I mean, to me, transitions are just as important, if not more important, than piaffe. We can't have a good piaffe if we can't ride transitions. You might have a horse that maybe is a star at piaffe, and you can pretend for a while that, oh, I can ride piaffe, but if you try to make transitions from piaffe to passage and back again, then it's not going to work. So, details.
So getting back to, again, practicing the test at home before you go to the show, so that you have that comfort level of knowing that when you go to the show, that you have that in there, that you're not struggling to say, oh, wait, oh, this is the test where I turn left and so on in the half pass, oh, that's a harder line of half pass or something. That it should be, I mean, a combination of things. It has to be confident that you know where you're going, the lefts and the rights and so on, where the transitions are, and practicing at the letters and so on. And the other part of that is also choosing the appropriate test, that you're showing at the appropriate level for you and your horse too, that you're not reaching for something that really isn't attainable. It's got to be at a certain comfort level at home, and you should be ideally schooling at somewhat of at least approximately a level above where you want to show. And so often, I think, we all get eager and want to say, oh, but I'm practicing that or whatever, and I want to get there and do it, right? We're all probably a little bit guilty of that. But the more if you think, well, it's a show, you want to really show what you can do well, that you shouldn't be going to the show and doing the things that aren't really quite working yet necessarily. Other little details at the show, something to think about, are first impressions. We talk about, like, when we're sitting at sea, often we might have a moment sitting at sea or wherever we're sitting to see the horse coming around the outside of the arena. You're not being judged at that moment when you come around the outside of the arena, but there's a certain impression. As I said, we're all humans sitting there. It can't help but filter in there a little bit. Is this a nice harmonious picture that we're looking at? And
is it looking prepared for the level that it's going to do, or is it already giving us the impression like, oh my God, is it going to work?
And it's amazing when you can tell in that little moment around that you can see it right. You say, wow, you're hoping to look for it and say, yeah, this looks like they're going to do it and this is going to be great, because we're really on the side of the rider. We want to give good scores. It's a lot more fun to sit there and give good scores, to give nice marks to good riding and nice horses and so on. And we really are there to do that, not there to be policemen and say, oh, they got it, the flying change was late or the half pass didn't bend and so on. So I want to talk a little bit about some other certain little tips to get, we all want to know tips, what judges are looking for to get better scores still in the ring, some specifics. We had some...
Well, not everybody is blessed with a horse that was born as a 10 mover or body beautiful or whatever, but that doesn't mean that maybe if it doesn't have the scope of movement that some of the other fancier horses have, that means your score always has to be down. There's ways for people to make, I feel like sitting as a judge, I see too many marks being thrown away. But
what does that mean, thrown away?
Well, just a minute.
Oh, okay.
Too many scores that could be better, but there's just not enough attention to certain details. They don't know how much better they can make their score by paying attention to certain things. a center line and a halt, especially if it's just one judge at sea, we don't always get to see how great that trot is when the rider enters, or if it's the fourth level it canters in. We don't really have a chance to really see how great the movement is. All we see is a straight center line, a halt, salute, and a move off. But to me, it shouldn't matter. There's no excuse for anybody to not be able to ride correct center lines with good transitions to and from the halts. And even if it's a horse that maybe never achieves more than a 6 as a mover, should be able to get a 10 on the center line if we pay attention. There's places that it doesn't matter whether the horse has a big gait or not, that you can make up points for what it's not. Okay, maybe that horse is never going to get more than a 6 in a medium trot. I mean, the horses that maybe aren't going to get more than 5 in medium trot, but it can get 8, 9, and 10 on the center line. Halts, rein backs.
That's a lot of points.
Horse doesn't have to be a brilliant mover to make a correct halt and a rein back, a willing rein back. Those are places you can make up. Turns on the haunches does not depend on a 10 walk. Little places like that with attention to detail, you can make up big time.
Some of the little details related to what you mentioned before also, the rein back now, it's required that you're supposed to have 3 seconds of halt before your rein back. Something, a little detail to keep in mind. Some people are halt rein back right away, which makes often for an unsettled sort of rein back anyway.
There's a mark that's given up.
Yeah.
The horse looks like it's going to make a really well-balanced halt, but the rider's anxious. It barely halts and already they're in rein back. They've already lost a mark because the halt was never established.
Yeah, yes, Marilyn pointed out also the 3 seconds and your beginning halt, beginning and ending halts on the center line as well.
It's focus this year.
Right, yeah, yeah.
It's
No, that-
codified. It's
obedience.
So
Sure.
there's ways to make up. Stretching circles. The stretching circle doesn't depend on a 10 trot. If it's ridden correctly, and it doesn't matter, I mean, everybody's, well, I shouldn't say everybody, but more often than not, I see the reins just get thrown away and the horse goes like that. Well, that's nothing to do with stretching. And then the circle wanders and all that, but it got long and low. Well, it's still really not correctly stretched because it's supposed to be in the contact. And then the retaking is another detail. I've seen, or given, decent marks on a stretching circle, but they could have had another point higher, but they never retook the reins. They did the stretching circle and then let that run into the next movement, which is usually medium walk, but they never retook the reins, so they lose a mark there. And then into the medium walk, well, that's not a well-balanced transition into that walk because the horse is down here.
So you
So they give
so you
another
lost
mark away.
two scores down.
So there's ways,
Accuracy.
yes.
And I think talking about, and back to transitions again, we actually did some in the
This one, we
new
never did
test.
this before.
I never really did this, but this is kind of interesting because I've always sort of heard that transitions, you say, are at least 50% of your score. But if you look at training level test 1, which I think only has 13 boxes on it, the whole test is 13 boxes. Of those, at least 10, there are at least 10 transitions. Okay?
If you really dissect the text,
That's a lot.
there's 10 transitions in there.
And then second, what we looked at, I think second level 1, same idea, whatever, I think there's, I don't know, there's like 20, whatever, about 20 boxes, and there's actually 23 transitions.
Wow.
Because some of the transitions, if you think about it, even the halt, you've got in the halt, out of the halt, that's basically 2 transitions. Your medium trot, you've got collected trot before and after, 2 transitions. So a lot of boxes are two transitions in each box. That's 23 transitions in one test. So think about
And
that.
transitions should be seamless. I mean, to get top marks, you need to think about these things. But we never counted the number of transitions, and it's like, we just started to get upset.
Yeah,
It's like,
no,
oh my God.
I thought that was a
that's lot.
really interesting thing to think about in terms of those numbers.
And fluid
perspective.
transitions really influences the submission score. You can have a horse that maybe never moves its head and neck, it appears to be on the bit, but then the transitions are not smooth, and then the rider gets the test back and it was 6 on submission. They go, well, how come my horse never came off the bit and all that? Maybe transitions were a little bit rough, or there were no transitions. They got from one point to the next, but there was no real balance over those transitions. So it all weighs then in the submission score and then the rider score.
So, yeah, talking about the collectives here. These are the collectives as they read now for the new 2015
Yes, this
test.
is
There
new.
are some differences now, and we can talk a little bit about the 2015 test, because that's what we're all for now. But some of the differences are now, instead they have only 2 rider scores instead of 3. We used to have Harmony under Rider 2, if you recall, for the last 4 years. But now, if you notice, Harmony is put up in the submission now. And the wording here for submission especially has changed some. Willing cooperation is new. Harmony. Attention and confidence has always been there. Acceptance of it and aid, straightness, lightness of forehand, and ease of movement. So they've taken a little bit that Harmony score for the rider, which always tied into the submission score anyway. They really should reflect each other. So that's what they've done now. So now for rider, you have the position and seat, which we've always had, and they've added a little different wording here, which is interesting to think about too. Alignment, posture, stability, weight placement, following mechanics of the gaits. Really good, good wording, how do you see?
I love it.
I bet you will. And then for riders, correct and effective use of the aids, which we've also always had, a little bit different to clarity, subtlety, independence, and accuracy of the test, which always goes to, well, we've already brought up several times, but the accuracy of geometry and how important that is.
Right, right. So that ties into its own, it's almost not a completely separate score, but in a way it is.
And if you know, and then and just kind of skip down here, whatever. But from the top is, and this has been this way for a while. The gates, and again, coefficient-wise, is only a coefficient of 1. You know,
Years
the
ago,
old ones, for a while, it's just been 1. So in other words, if you've got however your horse moves isn't weighted as heavily, and then impulsion is pretty much the same wording. But desire to move forward, elasticity of the steps, suppleness of the back is a big important part of impulsion and engagement of the hindquarters. And I think the suppleness of the back is a big thing when people see that their impulsion score is low, that maybe they don't quite understand how that really ties in. If a horse is tight in the back and they think that they flew.
Speed has
But,
little to do with impulsion.
and it's true, so you're like, well, fine. So that's a huge part of it. And then if we think about engagement, relating all this again back to our training scale, it's really, we have to keep that in mind over and over. And on the submission, in addition just to willing cooperation and this acceptance of different aids and the straightness, so we're talking about a little bit the lateral suppleness, the acceptance of the lateral suppleness. This means even accepting the rider's aids to go forward. A horse that does, you can think about it, and that comes in 2 ways. You have a horse that's reluctant to go forward from the rider's aids. That also comes down in submission, doesn't it? The horse isn't willing and cooperative to go forward from the rider's aids. You think, oh, that's impulsion. But really, it's submission, and then it's rider and effective use of the aids too. So if you have a horse that's really reluctant to go forward, or you don't have him in front of your driving aids and your activating aids, that comes down in a lot of places, doesn't it? Not to mention everything above the line of the collected marks. And something in terms of the scoring that you've got to, that hopefully goes, is kind of common sense, but if our score, when we say everything above the line, above the collected marks on the body of the test, if you added up those numbers separately and came up with a percentage for those and a percentage for these, they should be fairly closely correlated. In other words, if you've got somebody with 7s and 8s up, if everything is 7 and 8 up above, and they're in the 70% range, if you look at the top of the test, and down here it's like 5s or something, then something's not right. Okay.
And vice versa. If the top was
and if there's 1 or maybe there's a 4, maybe in the upper test something happened, a flying change was late, the horse spooked once or something, there's a 4 or maybe a 5 or 2 because of this and that, but there's the rest are 7s and 8s, then this should still reflect a pretty good score down here too. It shouldn't be that suddenly that should be 4. If there's 3 or 4 4s up there for different reasons, well then you're going to be seeing the submission score and everything coming down. Even if there were 8s up above too. But if you get to that point where there's several inconsistencies at that level, then that's obviously going to reflect on the whole thing.
To get back to the science of this.
Yeah.
In relation to accuracy, in the new 2015 third 3 tests, they've changed the single flying change, which comes up on the center line towards the judge, to a half circle, and then a short diagonal. But in the what do you call the directives?
Yeah, the directives.
The directives. It says the flying change should be done near X. So my question is, if you're on the short diagonal and you're near X, does it matter if you do it before, at, or after, or
No.
whatever works for your
Near.
horse?
Near.
Can be a
If
little,
it's a
if your
good
horse
change.
isn't prepared and they're giving you the leeway, if it's not prepared and you go a horse's length after X
Mhm.
and you make a very correct flying change, you should be rewarded for it. If you're 10 miles past X, well, no, that's not near X, and you.
So
Well,
if it says near X, then the closer to X, then the better chance you have for an even higher score.
Okay, but
The
you
more
could be
centered it
equally
is, the
close
better.
to X before it and after
Yes.
it. So I
Yes.
was wondering, you know, as we're talking about being human and everything, you know, if you do it in the same distance, I can be very detail oriented. If you do it in the same amount of meter after X as before, would that sway how you would be judged?
If you did the same to both sides.
And the exact good.
And if they were really correct and all
Yes.
that, then I probably would then give you brownie points on the rider score if everything else were correct and you thought about then trying to mirror image the other side and make it look, and I would say that's a clever rider.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
Actually, there's a quick thought.
It should be.
Okay.
Thank you for watching. Join us again for our next episode of Shop Talk.